Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our session featuring peace in Northeast Asia, youth, gender, and digital governance. My name is Sheila Park, and I'm a political affairs officer at the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs at the United Nations in New York. I will be your moderator today, and I'm joined by three speakers, Ms. Tina FUWA, Ms. Manjiang, and Ms. Ijun Kim. Young and bright peace builders that have been part of DPPA's Futuring Peace in Northeast Asia initiative. The Futuring Peace in Northeast Asia initiative is dedicated to deepening opportunities for youth to share their unique observations for regional peace and security with policymakers, stepping towards broader representation of youth in high-level policy fora. In line with the UN's Youth, Peace and Security agenda, the initiative aims to encourage young people to build peaceful societies, support effective governance in their communities towards an environment conducive to dialogue and cooperation within Northeast Asia. Today's session will focus on the experiences of the three young peace builders in navigating the digital space as women and their personal experiences contributing to inclusive digital governance. The session will also explore the intersection of the UN's Youth, Peace and Security agenda and the Women, Peace and Security agendas in the digital age. The Speak program session today on digital governance is also very timely as next month the UN will hold its first global dialogue on AI governance in Geneva, where governments and related stakeholders will discuss international cooperation, share best practices, and advance inclusive discussions on AI governance. The dialogue will cover four main themes. First, AI opportunities and implications. Second, bridging AI divides. Third, safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. And fourth, respecting, protecting, and promoting human rights. At the Global Dialogue, the Secretary General's Independent International Scientific Panel on Artificial Intelligence will present its preliminary report on global cooperation on AI governance. So I highly encourage you to take a look and read and explore how young people's voices can feed into it. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start with the presentations prepared by Ijun, Manjiang, and Tina. So over to you, ladies.
Thank you, Sheila, for the very kind introduction, and I'm glad to hear that I am still considered young. Please give us a moment as we switch slides. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here. We're really excited to share a little bit of our perspectives and our stories navigating the space of youth, gender, and digital governance. I would like to move on to the next slide. So we prepared a very short presentation just to prime all of you and the audiences. And first I want to recognize that this is a very small snapshot of the experiences young women have navigating and experiencing these digital spaces. But without further ado, take it away.
Yeah, so when women scroll content online, they move through a whole universe. Fashion tips, beauty routines, lifestyle inspiration, civil rights discussion, parenting stories, live streaming moments, and endless shopping suggestions. While each piece feels casual, it quietly shapes how women view themselves and their positions in the world. For example, in the third and sixth images, the message is clear: be slim, be healthy, and be beautiful. However, behind the message sits a whisper of doubt. Am I not skinny or pretty enough? Do I have to look like this? Then, in the second image from the left, there's where a young child shares his life story online. It makes me pause and wonder, do I ever want my own kid in the future exposed online so early? Then in the fourth image, you will see women discuss sharing their surnames with their husband. It also reminds us how digital space can create awareness and also actions and actions around women's rights.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be curious to know if maybe people in the audience have a similar algorithm to this as well. But this will kind of be a little bit of a theme throughout this session, is we encourage you to look a little beneath the surface into the deeper meaning of what these potentially surface level things can mean. This is a perspective that we've tried to bring throughout the presentation, and we'll hope you'll continue to explore this issue with us. Thank you.
So thank you for that. We'll go ahead and get started with our discussions, and where the speakers will respond to 4 questions that I posed to them. So the first one is, what does it mean to be a young woman experiencing online spaces and the rapid development and integration of AI? What sort of content do we see, and what does this content imply?
So I will take this first. A young woman's experience online, I'd say, often feels like walking along a spectrum where empowerment and vulnerability coexist side by side. On one hand, digital platforms open extraordinary opportunities. They give women space to speak, to learn, to build businesses, and to earn income in ways that are unimaginable a decade ago. Through live streaming, content creation, and e-commerce, women can share their knowledge, identity, and to engage with audience that are far beyond their hometowns. Many gain digital literacy, entrepreneurial confidence, and supportive communities. This is especially transformative shift for women in rural and home-based settings because many of them, they had very limited access to public platforms. Here, I want to share a story of young Chinese woman called Li Ziqi because her online journey can capture this promise beautifully. So Li Ziqi was born in rural Sichuan province in southwest China. She was orphaned at a very young age and raised in poverty. She had to drop out of school and start working as a restaurant waitress at age 14. In 2012, she returned to her hometown to take care of her grandmother after grandfather passed away. Starting from 2015, she started to creating quiet and poetic videos of traditional cooking and handicrafts online. Her works resonate across culture and continent. In 2021, she received the Guinness World Record of the most subscribers for a Chinese language channel on YouTube. By 2026, she has more than 32 million subscribers on YouTube and tens of millions more on Chinese platforms such as WeChat, Douyin, or RedNote. So her story become a symbol of how digital space can elevate young women's creativity and economic independence. It also inspired many others to share their own stories. However, the digital world is also a double-edged sword. The same visibility that empowers young women also exposes them to harm, harassment, rumor, defamation, and endless scrutiny. So as Li Ziqi's fame grows, so as the attacks. Netizens online claim that her videos were fake, that she had a secret team, that a beautiful woman could not simply produce such work. So she faced personal attack, invasive suspicion, and reputational damage. In 2021, she also was involved in patent dispute with her business partner. So the business dispute and also the emotional toll of online violence eventually put her offline for 3 years before she cautiously returned online in late 2024. So, but however, this tension is not unique to her. Many women engaged online, either as entrepreneurs, creators, or simply as individuals, encounter such harassment and also algorithmic bias, gendered expectations, and also the pressure to perform certain version of femininity. The economic opportunity also can come with privacy risks, abusive customer engagements, and also the fear of being misrepresented or attacked. So I'd say the story of young women online is a story of empowerment and exposure, opportunity and risks, creativity and vulnerability. So it is essential for us to understand this duality if we want a digital space that truly supports women's participation, dignity, and also their rights. Yeah.
Ijun or Tina, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I'll definitely echo what Manjiang said about these tools being a dual-edged sword. And, I think that's the nature of many tools, not only social media, AI, but the tool itself is not inherently good or bad, but it's how we design them and how we use them. And, just a small example, I've definitely been influenced by content online. I've seen countless Pilates content, and eventually I started taking Pilates classes because I felt like I need to do something to feel stronger and do something to look better, right? And this is a very, small and maybe a little funny example, but I think it illuminates the mental impact that these content really do have on us and how it manifests in our everyday lives. The fact that, yes, on the one hand, me starting to take Pilates classes, it means, oh, I'm investing in myself, I'm taking care of myself. But is that truly driven by the desire to take care of myself or to conform to societal norms of what women should do and should look like? I still haven't made up my mind, and I suppose there really is no clear-cut answer. It's a bit of a gray zone, but absolutely it has a very real impact on our lives. And as Tina invited us to continuously explore and unpack this together, even beyond the session, I think I need to do a little bit of exploration myself.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly comment on, I think you were talking about empowerment, and a big part of that I think is like cutting out the middleman, and now the gatekeepers are kind of away, which kind of allows people or new things to come up. And I kind of wanted to talk about more on the policy side of how this can happen. I think we've seen a lot with like politicians becoming more social media savvy. And a good part of that is it's encouraged more grassroots movements. We've seen politicians that in previous decades would not have been able to be elected because they don't have the correct, they're not in the right party or don't have the right connections. But now people are able to, younger people are able to enter into government. Women are being entered into government as well. I think it's also important for us to understand that social media kind of content and politics can also give rise to populist kind of tendencies. So as young people, when we look at this content, we really have to be aware of kind of the broader picture behind it as well.
Thank you. What we're hearing is that for young women, online spaces are not neutral, and they're environments that reflect and often amplify existing inequalities, and the rapid integration of AI is making that experience more complex. Which brings me to our second question of policy environments made by governments and institutions. The second question will be, what factors shape online spaces in Northeast Asia and our countries? What sort of policies are currently in place or not in place?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So I'm from Japan. So speaking about Japan specifically, Japan has traditionally been seen as quite highly technologically advanced, strong digital infrastructure, highly connected online spaces. There's really growing investment in areas right now, especially in cybersecurity, AI, digital transformation. The Japanese government has established the Digital Agency in 2021, and they are implementing new national AI measures, cybersecurity strategies, viewing these technologies as very essential for Japan's future and global competitiveness. I think a good example of how Japan deals with digital technology is with how they've implemented the digital identity or the My Number card, where it took a long time to implement a lot of political and social opposition in the beginning stages. But once it's implemented, now it's developing its connectivity very rapidly, and now you can access so many kind of online government spaces as well.
Yeah, maybe I will go next then. So I want to very briefly talk about the first question, the factors that shape online space in Northeast Asia. In my case, is in China. So I think there are four major actors that are shaping online space. The first one is the commercial platforms, such as in China's context is WeChat or Rednote or Douyin. Internationally, it is TikTok, YouTube. They design the infrastructure of our online life and they set the rules for visibility. And the second one is the content creator, either through from influencers to small entrepreneurs. So they shape online space by creating content that that entertains, to sell, or to inform the users. And their goal is to attract attention, to build those communities, and also often to generate income. And the third actor is, I think most of us here, also as the ordinary users, we shape the online space by viewing, liking, commenting, and sharing. So we as users, we can punish or reward the content through our engagement. And the last actor is the regulators. So these set the legal boundaries of what's allowed online. Government impose regulations to manage the harmful information, protect public rights, and as well as to maintain the social stability. So each of the actors, they play an essential but also distinct role in shaping what we see online, how they behave, and also eventually what is allowed and what is not. So I think these are the four major factors or actors that shape what we're seeing today. And then in the China's policy context, the China's approach to AI and digital governance is a combination of supportive of AI development as a strategic technology tool, as well as the regulations on content regulation, platform accountability, cybersecurity, personal information protection. The earliest AI development plan was established in 2017, where AI was positioned as a national technology development tool. And then there's a broader digital governance law, which includes the cybersecurity law, personal information protection law, which were passed in 2021. And then in 2022, there's telecom and online fraud law. So all these laws build the foundations of how digital space or online space should be governed. So it focuses on the security, personal information protection, and also how the citizens, they should engage responsibly to avoid online fraud as well. So I'll pass to Ijun very quickly.
Thank you. Yes, I'll speak more specifically in the context of Korea, because that's where I'm from. And I recently came across a really interesting example. So certain districts and cities in South Korea are piloting AI bus stops. And this is where a rider can walk up to a bus stop and interact with a screen that is installed there, powered by AI systems, to either ask what the best route to take is to their destination or even order a cab. And while this is one of many initiatives relevant to AI in the country, I think it's just an example of how closely interwoven emerging technologies, and in this case AI, already is in South Korea and will only continue to accelerate. And speaking of it being interwoven, I mean, I think there was a recent survey that revealed a vast majority of South Koreans are already using AI on a daily basis, whether it's for work, whether it's to make decisions for them, or even as a confidant where they ask questions and try to get advice. And so AI has already become such an integral part of our lives. And I think this is something we definitely should take note, because on the other hand, there's the general global trend of rising anxiety and uncertainty about AI. People are kind of scared of it, but in Korea, people love it. We're very excited about it. And there was a survey that said 16% of South Korean respondents said they're more concerned than excited about AI. So 16% is very, very small. And this survey interacted with people from 25 different countries, and how South Koreans felt about it in terms of how nervous and anxious they are. It was the lowest of 25 countries. So we love AI. And I think part of this is driven by decision makers and the government as a whole in South Korea really kind of pushing AI as a way, it's a breakthrough and it's something that's going to usher in the next industrial revolution. And a big part of that is driven by economic growth or the desire for economic growth. I want to point out, I suppose there is no inherent problem with chasing economic growth, but I think it's important for us to recognize that economic growth is often accompanied by a sense of urgency. It needs to happen quickly and we want to see results. But in this case, when you combine urgency with an emerging piece of technology that, like AI, that we do not fully understand the implications of, that's where we open the doors for some problems. And I'm sure many of you here in the room are familiar with the AI textbook initiative that was implemented in Korea a few months ago. And the intention was great. It would personalize learning, it would reduce inequality, and it would make teachers' lives easier because they already have so much to do. But what actually happened was complaint after complaint came in about the inaccurate content that is being disseminated among students, about the risks to data and private information. And because teachers were working overtime to make this work, they were actually burdened further from what they had to do in the past. So unfortunately, this had to be rolled back. And I think this is a key example of when we do not fully take the time and the intentionality to review a product to say, is this going to deliver on what we hope it will from many different aspects and facets? Something like this can happen. And because we're here to talk about gender, I cannot not mention the experience of women. We know how South Korea was rocked by news of hundreds and thousands of women and girls becoming victims to deepfakes. It's terrible. And a lot of these harms are crippling and long-lasting. And it does make me wonder whether if we had the policies and the mindset to say, this is an exciting piece of technology, we want to share with people, but we also want to recognize that we need to take the time to truly review it to make sure we're not doing harm. If that had been in place, then could we have maybe avoided the harm that was caused to so many women and girls? Maybe. So this was a pretty grim picture, but there is some positive movement in response to this. For example, again, many of you probably know that the South Korean government recently passed and the legislation came into effect, which is called the AI Basic Act. And I think this is really exciting because that positions South Korea as one of the first countries to implement a very comprehensive law on AI. So it's not just this must be done or that must be done, but it's a very holistic approach to how we develop, deploy, and review how AI is shaping our societies. And I think this is the kind of approach that we definitely need, and we're on the right track. But now it's just a question of whether it does, again, as any product does, whether this kind of act really delivers on what we hope it will, and whether it has a good feedback mechanism that allows citizens to actively partake in the review process, give feedback from the perspective of people who are actually using it and being impacted by these experiences.
Thank you. So I guess our speakers have given us a nuanced picture where some governments in the region are making meaningful strides in digital regulation while significant gaps remain. And the line between protecting citizens and restricting freedoms is not always clearly drawn. I guess understanding the policy landscape is one thing, but knowing how to navigate it and advocate within it is another. And that's where personal experience and capacity becomes essential. So our third question speaks directly to this. How did participating in DPPA's Futuring Peace in Northeast Asia reshape your experience and approach to advocating for safer and more responsible digital governance?
I can speak again, thank you. And I'm really glad that we have this space to talk about this because this program, the few years that I was a part of, was truly a formative time for me. So I could go on, but I'll try to keep it short. So it started in 2021, where us as a group of young, bright and young, I think Sheila, you said, bright and young Peacebuilders, we were asked to imagine the future in 2040. What would it look like? And we had the opportunity to explore how digital literacy programs, other forms of emerging technologies, or even just new ways of thinking and approaching common problems could strengthen cross-border ties. So it was a lot of story building. Then the following year, informed by those scenarios, we developed tangible policy recommendations on what needs to be done to not only to create mechanisms for good governance, but also to make the region more peaceful. And the year after that was really a year of kind of getting out there, engaging with policy experts, and stress testing our policy recommendations. And UNDPPA supported us in participating in various fora, ranging from the Ulaanbaatar Dialogue for Northeast Asian Security to here, the Jeju Forum. So it was a very exciting time where we were going to new places, meeting new people, telling them our side of the story and what we think should be done from the perspectives of young people who have very real stakes in the challenges that are manifesting now and will evolve very quickly. Then after that, we expanded the program to the Pacific. So young people from the Pacific and Northeast Asia came together to explore some common challenges, such as gender equality, the lack of youth participation, unregulated emergent technologies, and of course, climate change. And here, once again, we leverage the future space, talking about the future, what kind of future we hope to live in, but also what kind of future we anticipate will become the reality. And usually there's a bit of a gap between the ideal future and the likely future, unfortunately. And then we continued on expanding this program, and most recently, once the Global Digital Compact was passed, and just in case there's a few people in the room who don't know, it's a framework put forward by the UN Secretary General on digital governance and cooperation, and both on digital tools generally, and of course, specifically AI. And by harnessing the momentum around, people talking about it, getting interested in what digital governance and what good digital governance means, young people came together to create recommendations specific to Northeast Asia. How do we align with that guidance, but also how do we do even better in the region specific to this context? So yeah, the few years was really, really exciting. And yes, there are many takeaways from this experience, but one thing that I realized was that we are suffering from the consequences of short-termism. So only thinking of the immediate risks and gains and making decisions based on that. And the impact of this, the impact of short-termism, the consequences are felt by many, of course, by everyone. But I would just like to point out that young people and children are the most vulnerable. And not only are they most vulnerable, but they will also be exposed to the impact for the longest time because many of them will live well beyond the decision makers of today. So then it made me think, well, why aren't children and young people in the room when we're making decisions? Why are we not asking them and ensuring they're in the room to inform decision making today so that it does shape the future that they want to live in? And this is why I'm now, the question is, how did this reshape my experience and approach to advocating? I'm a huge advocate for intergenerational governance. And I really want to see more governance systems and mechanisms and decision makers who are part of that, who recognize children and young people as equal partners. They may not speak the same language as the experts who have 20, 30 years of experience on them, but they have even more stakes, I might argue, than the decision makers of today because that's their future. And I keep saying there because I feel like I'm not really obviously I'm not a child, maybe I'm not a young person anymore, but I would like to say I'm a very strong ally in advocating for children and young people to be in the room. And I'll just bring this back to the example of the Futuring Peace in Northeast Asia program. I have never felt so confident speaking to and interacting with policy experts who are 40-something and professors who are in their 80s and political advisors who had 50 years in the career of policy. And this was because we were embracing the space of futures. We were thinking about the future, and because inherently there's so much uncertainty about what is going to shape it and what it's going to look like, there was essentially no right or wrong answer. And this allowed me to feel more confident and say, hey, I may not be an expert like you who's worked in diplomacy for 30 years, but I have just as much to say based on my personal experiences and what my ambitions are for the future. And this is why I think it's really important that together we leave this space ready to advocate that young people are more than capable of participating in this and that we absolutely should have a space in shaping the future.
Yeah, just to add to that, I found it, really interesting in terms of you were talking a lot about young people and what that means in policymaking. And I think I started off this program almost being a little bit skeptical of like, what can a young person do? This is such a technical issue, such a governance issue. Why are we here? What perspective can we have? And then I realized that especially right now with, heightening geopolitical tensions, if we were all policymakers from our countries, would we be able to have the same discussions we have now? Maybe not. But because we are young people that kind of have more independent positions, we're able to talk quite frankly and really speak with each other about what these issues are. And hopefully this is not going to be the case, but if the situation does get more severe in the world, then maybe young people will be the kind of final channel that we have to continue these kind of conversations. So that was a really big thing that I kind of almost revalued myself as a position as a young person. And when we talk about things like data sharing, which is a big part of digital technologies, doing that as part of governance, doing that as part of organizations, very, very difficult. But when young people come together, doing it as research, bringing our experience, talking about personal experience, this can be done a lot easier. And I also think we have an open mind towards each other. So although the technologies we face are quite similar, like AI, emerging tech, there's a lot of regional differences in the challenges that we do face. So when we share these experiences, I think we get to kind of see how differently we navigate them or what's important for different people. And I think a big theme that came up, because I joined this program last year, is that are we going to be, competing against each other with these new technologies, or are we going to be working with each other with these technologies? And I think young people really do play such a central role, especially in this current geopolitical environment.
Yeah, maybe I can also very quickly to add, besides what Ijun and Tina mentioned. So one thing that I feel truly appreciative for this UNDPPA program is that it creates a platform that allows me, as a young person from China, to connect with the peers in the region from Korea, from Japan, and also from Mongolia. This is something that I cannot get every day. So I really appreciate this opportunity. I think it is through this program I got to know how my peers in other countries, how they view the same issue. Because we are, just like we said, we are young, we do not have the burden, we can speak frankly and share frankly. And that is one part. Another part is I want to share, this program also gives us opportunity as young representative to bring our voice to international forum, such as this one, and also another one that is called International Governance Forum in Japan in 2023. There we are able to engage with peers, experts, and policymakers to broadening our perspectives and also to build a connective understanding of digital future. The last point I want to mention is, so in the world where the digital and online connection feels so easy, but this experience also reminded me of the irreplaceable value of in-person connection. So meeting face-to-face, like what we're doing today, allows us to build trust, to exchange ideas to more deeply, to form relationship that no online interaction could really duplicate. Yeah.
Thank you. What strikes me in these reflections is that participation in the Futuring Peace initiative did not just build knowledge, it created agency. And shifting how our speakers see themselves in relation to these issues and what they believe they are capable of doing about them. And that sense of agency is exactly what our final question asks us to put into practice, because awareness and advocacy are not only the beginning, change requires concrete action. So we'll close with this last question. To build a safe and inclusive digital space, what needs to be done now from the perspective of young people? Over to Tina.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to start answering this question by kind of posing a question of, are young people generally being included in conversations about online policy, or are we being used to justify it in certain ways? And a good example of how I want to explore this is looking at the Online Safety Act that was established in the UK, and also kind of social media bans that we've seen recently coming up in Australia and also recently passed in the UK as well. So if you're not familiar with this, the Online Safety Act was basically a legislation that came into act around 2 years ago, and the goal is to establish kind of a higher standard of safety for online users. And in terms of social media bans, I'm sure you've all heard of them as well, but usually they ban children under the age of 16, or in some cases under the age of 18 as well. So in terms of how we look at this, with the Online Safety Act, how it developed politically is it started as an act that was supposed to be helping the general public, so not just children, but adults with anything from harassment, scams, harmful content, but within the political process, it found a lot of resistance against implementing these types of protections, and it slowly transitioned into something that was centered around protection of children and young people. And its final form actually specifically focuses on young people, and it's set out to help the protections against them. Of course, it's very important to protect children online, but it's also interesting to think about how young people are often used as kind of a tactical argument within policy debates, while their actual perspectives, experiences, and needs are rarely centered in the final outcomes. So when we think about things like, are social media bans actually going to be helpful for us, it's also good to think about is it a way of platforms to be kind of avoiding larger accountability to the general public by removing children from these spaces? And are they actually meaningfully engaging with these issues of harassment, disinformation that already do exist? So very much young people are being spoken about, being used as a tactic, but are the outcomes that these policies present, are they actually helpful for us? Is removing us from these spaces actually what is for us? I think that's quite an important perspective to have when we actually look at these policies. I also want to transition it into thinking about women as well. And these policies raise an important question about who gets protected, what kinds of protections are prioritized, and whether limiting access actually addresses the root cause of these things. So when we speak about women, it's usually thought of as kind of an afterthought or an additional consideration, kind of, it'll be nice to also have protection against women. But I wanted to add some perspective about this, because women are often framed as naturally vulnerable users of the internet. However, I think a much more important perspective is recognizing that women are not inherently vulnerable, but we are made vulnerable because they are specifically targeted within these years. Ijun, I think you also mentioned things about deepfakes and stuff like that. This is not just an accidental thing that happened. This is very, very specific. We are specifically being excluded from conversations like this, and I think that's very important to think about. I remember hearing a quote from a NATO director a few years ago who's working in disinformation, and she said that women are not vulnerable by nature, but vulnerable because they are deliberately targeted. And I think sometimes we do forget this when we talk about conversations around gender. I think this perspective is really important when we see women not as simply needing extra protection, but instead focuses attention on kind of the systems, platforms, actors that actively create unsafe conditions for them. We can see how this clearly developed with kind of AI technologies and online platforms. In many cases, companies have failed to adequately protect women kind of from the start and are now kind of adding in additional protections when the harm has kind of already been done with harmful AI-produced images, stuff like that. These failures are often treated as kind of unfortunate side effects of innovation, but in reality, they reflect very conscious decisions about whose safety is prioritized and whose experiences get ignored. Because of this, thinking about women's safety online should not be treated as an additional feature or an afterthought that's added later. It needs to be central to how digital policy and AI systems also get designed as well.
Would you like to add?
Sure. I think I already kind of said my piece with a previous question. So it's no secret, I'm a very, very passionate advocate for intergenerational governance. So yeah, I mean, and I think when we're talking about future, whatever future it is, whether it's a digital future, whether it's a climate future, whether it's a human future, if we're talking about future, children and young people have to be in the room. That's the bottom line for me. So I say we need to first ensure decision-making processes are actually designed to be child and youth friendly. If we're always talking in lingos and in very, very formal speech that is often dominated by policy experts with, again, years and years of experience, it does exclude so many of our constituents. So processes need to be redesigned. And in that process, from the get-go, children and young people have to be part of it. Because if you're not asking them, how do you want this to be designed, then how will you know? So they need to be asked, they need to be part of the design from the beginning. And at the end of this journey, there also needs to be a very clear and strong feedback mechanism. We cannot create yet another exploitative process where we bring children and young people into the room, ask them a bunch of questions, they pour their hearts out, and then they leave the room not knowing what they contributed to and if that's actually led to any change. And I think it's okay to be vulnerable and honest and say, hey, we went into this process with good intentions. Unfortunately, this time we weren't able to create tangible impact. Let's try again. I think that's okay, and I think a lot of the times we are a bit scared to admit to failures and mistakes. But I think having clear feedback mechanisms ensures that this is a cycle, not a one-off process that we start, we're done, and we leave the room not knowing what happened.
Then I want to add that, so we're talking about future, right? But what can we actually do today? And by us, by you, those who are sitting here. So in talking about digital future, talking about how to create safety or inclusive, it sounds so vague. But there's so many things that we can do actually from us. The first one is to be digitally literate. What does it mean? It means not only you know the basic technical skills. For example, you use social media. You know how to tweet, and then you share. This is very basic, right? But then you should also understand the structure or the system behind this. What determines what you see? How they are sent to you in front of your phone. With this understanding, so you will know what to choose to consume, what not. So with this awareness that you can, you as a person independently, you have that decision making and also decision thinking process, what you will read, watch, and share with others. And second is to protect yours and also other people's privacy. That means when you share information online, especially those are very sensitive, your personal information like your ID, your home address online, be very careful with it. And also when you share information of others, you should have their consent as well. And then the third one, I think is it's actually very easy to do as long as you have this awareness, is you can also support your senior people around you, like your parents and your grandparents who are not so digital literate. You can help them and also tell them, be careful with the online content or the information that they consume online. Be aware of the deepfake. Be aware of the information generated by AI or human. But I know it's becoming harder and harder to distinguish these days. And then you can also play a role. You as the young people or adults, you can also support the minors around you when you see they are in a disadvantaged position or they are harmed. You can also support them by reaching out the legal services or someone else that you know, so they are not the victims. So I just want to, at end of the session, there's something take away from this. There's actually a lot of things you can do as an individual. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This was very informative and gets us to think more on how to protect not just young people and women from the digital space, but also, as you mentioned, older generations that foster digital illiteracy, digital literacy. So I think we have some time for questions. So I'd like to open the floor to the audience, and we'll have the speakers answer some questions. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to ask one question. Ijun say that for making good policies with the regulations must also including the voices of the children and youth, which means that we will make kind of like a very inclusive policy, but making a inclusive policies takes a lot of time, right? And then, as we've seen, the technology is changing very rapidly, not only like years, maybe some months or something like that, when we went to make a very inclusive and then takes time. How we as a youth person or make a bridge with the government or the regulations for making that inclusive policy still be inclusive policy, but making it very fastly so it's effective and can answer or respond at the some problems that related to the AI and technology. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really good reminder that developing and implementing policy takes time, absolutely. And I do want to, challenge, do we actually need to do things very quickly? And one example is Anthropic, which is the company behind Claude, recently announced we need to stop developing AI. We need to pause and look back and review. And that absolutely takes time. And some people against this would say, then we're going to lose momentum. We're not going to achieve the level of nuance and, quality in AI systems that we want. But actually, I think sometimes taking a pause and a breather and actually making sure that the right people are in the room to make decisions together, I think that's something worth waiting for. So just one challenge, maybe it's okay to do things slowly. But second, absolutely, there are some things that simply cannot wait. Like, if there are no pauses in developing emerging technologies, then of course policy needs to keep up one way or the other. And also climate change, that simply cannot wait. We need to make progress now, right? And to your question on what can young people do, I think it's two-pronged. First, it's not a one-way street. So governments and decision makers also need to throw open their doors. Because if young people are constantly pushing and asking and demanding to be let in the room, but governments do not respond, then we've already seen what happens. There is a severe backsliding in democracy. Young people around the world are genuinely starting to question if democracy is valuable because they're not in the room. And the decisions that are being made do not represent their needs and wants. So then in this case, maybe this is a little controversial, but we have seen this example that if governments do not really listen to and engage their citizens, then it's very natural that citizens lose complete hope in the system itself, right? And democracy, there's many different examples of it, but truly representing and engaging the people is what democracy is. Whether we've seen that around the world, I leave that up to you to answer it to yourself. So first, I think governments really do have a role to play, and it's not only young people who have to push. But young people can push. And I think us being in the room is one signal of young people actively participating in it. And I think one of the main barriers to intergenerational governance and participation is that experts and decision makers question whether children and young people are even capable of contributing in a meaningful way and making decisions for themselves. So we need to start showing them in spaces like this that absolutely we can. We have the capacity. Again, we may not be speaking the kind of same languages that experts do, but we do have the agency and the mental capacity to know what we want, what we hope for, and how to advocate for that. Whether it's in a casual one-to-one conversation or whether it's drafting policy recommendations like we did. So again, it has to be not necessarily meeting in the middle because we're trying to get somewhere, trying to get to the future, right? But both sides have to take an active part in pushing and opening the doors and creating those spaces. And to your question on how to make policy happen faster, this may sound a bit counterintuitive, but there's been a lot of governments that are testing AI platforms to create more opportunities for a participatory democracy. So this is where people on an individual basis actually vote or provide recommendations for policy. And I think this is a really good use of AI, right? Because yes, we have thousands and hundreds and millions of people that a government is supposed to represent. But if we're trying to do that in a physical space, sometimes we may run into limitations. But if we are able to leverage the kind of technologies that we have often been talking about, and that's all over the news, to actually ensure that participatory decision-making is strengthened and enabled, then maybe we'll start getting somewhere a little faster.
Thank you. Especially the part on inclusion of young people's voices in decision making. I think, especially in Northeast Asia, we have a lot to improve on in that regards. Do we have another question? Okay, we'll take two questions. First here, and then.
Thank you very much. I have actually two little questions. The first one is that children are shaped by their environment and their upbringing, but the adults of today and the children that will be born even today or tomorrow do not grow up in the same world. So where do you put the limits between the professor and the students? And my second little question is, we're focusing about protecting women. We're focusing about protecting children. But why don't we focus our attention on targeting the threats and maybe diminishing them and maybe like trying to erase them? Thank you.
I think we can take the next question and then we'll answer all together.
Okay, first of all, thank you for Ijun, that you are being the strong ally for youth. And first question is that from Japan, starting from 2021, there was a digital tech department, and I wonder, do they integrate with educational departments? Because mostly in South Korea, kids are learning, mostly intaking the lessons, but not pause and ask questions because of the shortenisms that you said. Yeah. So I just wonder, like, how can we integrate this approach for the digital governance so that the parenting itself, the dad and mom, different lessons, then it's confusing. So how can we integrate this in all over the world? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Who would like to take lead in the questions?
I just wanted to answer, I think, two of them. I think one of your questions was about why aren't we addressing the threats instead of focusing on kind of conversations about young people. And I think, yeah, that's exactly kind of the thing I was talking about with social media bans and with the Online Safety Act, is young people are very much talked about, but we're rarely kind of actually a part of the political conversation and are used as kind of a political tactic. So when we look at news around we've done this for young people, we're protecting young people in these ways. It's really important to have that kind of perspective of how are we being exploited in some ways for our inherent kind of vulnerability and the need that society feels to protect us. So always having that bigger picture about thinking about the threats is such a good perspective to have. In terms of the second question about Japan, Japan and I spoke about it a little bit, but Japan is very, very slow to implement kind of changes. It takes a long time to think about what they want to do, and then once they implement it, it's fine, but it takes a little bit of time. And I think with education, we've seen a similar trend with this. The education sector in Japan also takes a really long time to innovate and implement. I think I was talking to some friends from the UK, and I was saying, oh, do you guys have a blackboard? Because we used a blackboard, and they were so shocked. They were like, a blackboard? Because they use a projector and all this stuff. I grew up on a blackboard, and I'm pretty sure people are still using blackboards as well. So that kind of changed around COVID time. I think that was a big wake-up call where they started giving, students tablets to study and stuff like that. So COVID, I think, was a really good kind of wake-up call to start implementing these things. But then again, we would love to see things of like how like digital literacy we were talking about. But are the other teachers that are teaching these things actually ready to teach these things? Are they themselves almost out of date? I think this is a really big kind of topic that we need to address. And maybe young people would be better in letting the teachers know these are the things that we also need to see.
I want to very quickly to address the question that about why we're not addressing the fraud or the problem. So I think we can shift the way of our thinking. The fraud itself is about problem, right? But how to address this problem? Here why we're focusing on youth and women and also children. They are in some instance, they are the victims. But at the same time, if we shift the way of our thinking, they can also be the agent. They can be the agent of solving the problem. That's the reason why we need to bring the voices of children, of women, of youth. And I think that is why it is important that we have a UN as a system that creates this space that brings young women and children together to have this voice shared, to have their perspectives and consideration into this. Why that is important? Because if we don't include them, we won't know what are their concerns, what are their thinking process, why that is important. I think if we shift the way of our thinking, we're thinking they are as the victims of the problem, but we're rethinking they can be the agent, they can be the agency of solving this problem. I think that is how we want to empower, that is how I understand empowerment of women, of children and youth. Yeah.
1 minute. Yes, absolutely. I think we do need to focus on addressing the threats instead of moving the burden to the victims and those who are exposed to those threats. And absolutely, I think this is why we need intergenerational governance and forward-looking and future-looking policies, and policies that are backed by processes that allow that kind of long-term thinking. Because if we're only looking at now, then we cannot emerge the problems that can happen in the future. But if we kind of sit back and look long-term, then we can start to anticipate, we have this happening right now. But then further down the line, we can anticipate based on evidence, based on individual stories and experiences that might be a problem later on. So rather than waiting for the threat to manifest, we need to start being proactive instead of reactive to say, this is probably going to be a problem and we need to start working on it now.
Thank you. I think that was 30 seconds. So I guess we'll close now, being mindful of time. We began this conversation today by asking what it means to inhabit online spaces as young women, and what we heard was honest, specific, and at times difficult. And we heard about context that reduces, excludes, and distorts, about algorithms that reward division, and platforms that were not designed with safety or inclusion as a priority. And we heard that the integration of AI into these environments is accelerating faster than the frameworks meant to govern it. I think the key takeaway from today's session was the essential need to have meaningful inclusion of young people in digital governance frameworks, regulatory approaches that center safety and equity, and accountability for platforms and governments, and recognition that digital peace is not separate from the broader goal of sustainable peace and security. And with that, I would like to thank our speakers sincerely for their contributions today, and to Jeju Forum for giving us the platform to have this meaningful engagement. And the work continues on this, but I see it is in very good hands with all the youth joining here today. So thank you all for joining.
Okay, thank you everyone for a great panel and active participation. We are going to have a 30-minute break, but before we take the break, I have a big favor to ask from everyone. First, I need you guys to pick up all your belongings because we are going to rearrange the tables for the group discussion. So make sure you don't lose anything, pick everything up. 그거 띄워줄 수 있으세요? 도면 띄워주시겠어요? And we're going to rearrange the tables in this format. So if you guys are feeling like you need some exercise, please help us out. And for the rest of you, you have 30 minutes for grab some coffee. I know you really need that caffeine. And please come back for the highlight of the evening, the group discussion. Thank you.